Hey everyone, this is Roma. I have to make an announcement. You're not gonna like it. um, I need to let y'all know that this episode released today is the final episode of the Hyperfixation podcast. Um, I have absolutely loved doing this show for what has it been, 2.5 years now. It feels like it. Almost 3 years, 2.5, I don't know. It's been an absolute honor and pleasure to work with the Moonshot Network, and I have come to a point in my life where I have to focus on my career and uh my future, and so I cannot continue to do this show anymore despite how much I absolutely adore it. I have been delaying this uh between the holidays and just grieving. um so a lot of you, this is going to be a surprise out of nowhere. To some of you, you knew that I was getting to a point accepting that this was going to need to happen. So what I'd like to say is thank you for your support. Thank you for loving the show. Thank you for telling me all the things that you've been excited about for 30 to 45 minutes or longer, because you know what? The timer's a lie. Um I will never forget this. I will never let these memories go. Um and of course, do not hesitate to reach out to me if you just want to talk about something fun. Um I love you all. I'm trying not to cry. Make sure you stay safe. Don't die. Drink your water. Take your vitamins. And enjoy this last episode. And adieu.
The first history man asks, who are we who wander into the wastes in search of our better selves? Every year at the Great Gathering, 3,500 souls heed the call, building a better wasteland in their own image and with each other. We are those, the Wastelanders. And this is Wasteland Weekend. Alright, so a disclaimer, I am not Wasteland Weekend staff, nor am I speaking on behalf of anyone else in my camp. I am speaking as myself, Tusker Rusk, nay, Greg Stephenson, and speaking alone in that, in case anybody from Wasteland Weekend staff is listening to this one.
And welcome to the Hyperfixation, where our friends come onto our show and tell us about things that excite them for 30 to 45 minutes or longer, because you know what? The timer's a lie. My name's Roma. I use the they and them pronouns, and today we have we have a very special guest with us, the one, the only, Tusker Rusk.
Hello, yes, I am Tusker Rusk, Ward Ranger of the Green Place. I've been to 4 Wasteland weekends between 2019 and 2024, and I'm here to share some of my experiences, my stories, and a general overview of what Wasteland Weekend is.
I'm so excited for this. I have heard good things about Wasteland Weekend, but I admittedly don't know much. I've just seen some, like, pictures online, and I've been part of the Burning Man community, like, the burner community, and so there's I've seen some stuff from that perspective and people being excited about it, but otherwise, I'm pretty much a blank slate. This is gonna be really cool.
Yeah, Burning Man is a decent starting point. It's not a perfect one, but it's a decent starting point because Wasteland, I like to characterize it as an immersive event first and foremost. It is partially a festival, it is partially a LARP, but first and foremost, the idea of Wasteland is there is a line in the sand that you cross that once you're past that line, you have to be fully in costume. You don't have to be fully in character, but you have to be part of the environment. And also, everybody camped on that side of the line and all the structures on that side of the line are supposed to be 360-degree in character. And so you end up with, like, for example, there are no formal LARP rules at Wasteland Weekend, but
Mhm.
you end up with this critical mass of immersion where some people inevitably just end up in character. Like, so for example, in camps and stuff, like, I mean, I only know one Wastelander who ever really calls me Greg first and foremost.
Mhm.
Everybody else that I know just kind of inevitably calls me Tusker as first line of contact. But
Mhm.
then also, I find myself, sometimes even thinking as like, oh, what is Tusker doing? More so than
Mhm.
what is Greg doing? Because
Mhm.
I find that critical mass starts hitting. And she, even talking about it, you can hear me kind of like vocal register stepping down.
Mhm.
And so I'll get into like the character gradient theory I have a little bit more later on in the episode. But first, I'm going to actually give you a handy dandy uh, link to click through, which is the event layout of Wasteland, because I think this is an important part of like understanding the map. Because again, there's that line in the sand I mentioned of like once you go into the theme zone, which on this map is actually kind of highlighted in dark orange. Like once you're
Mhm.
in that area, yeah, everything becomes this pure immersion. There are immersive spaces outside of the theme zone, but once you're in the theme zone, have you ever seen the third Max movie, Beyond Thunderdome?
No, I have not, but I need to.
Yeah. So I like to use Beyond Thunderdome as a little bit of more of a touchstone than Fury Road, which is these days the most popular movie, because Beyond Thunderdome has this thing called Barter Town, which is kind of the linchpin of the movie. And like we'll get into this a little bit more as well. This is not a pure Mad Max event, but Mad Max is kind of the touchstone. And
Mhm.
so it's a collaboratively built sort of barter town space called Wasteland City. And so actually on this map as well, you can see kind of a hard rust colored line cutting through the theme zone. And
Mhm.
that actually represents the wall going into Wasteland City. So at the very
Okay.
top of the map in the upper left hand or right hand corner, at the intersections of Fallout Path and Buzzard Lane and Fury Road, is the area where I camp and happens to be the start of the numbering system for the map. And that's the green place. And that's where I've camped every year I've gone to Wasteland Weekend, because the green place is kind of headlined by a group of camps that all share sort of a nomadic or like feminist theming and a lot of like greens and textiles based off of the Vuvolini from Fury Road, the like, mostly elderly biker grannies. And
Hell yeah.
so the kind of the big cornerstone of the green place at space number 5 on the map key and is the clan of the bolt cutters, who
Mhm.
I've camped with since 2022. And the clan of the bolt cutters are the kind of unofficial official f- fan club for the Vuvolini from Fury Road. Like we
Mhm.
actually have a fleet of motorcycles, and the Clan of the Bolt Cutters were founded in 2016, so before I ever showed up.
Mhm.
by a group of uh, probably about 30 or 40 people who all met up from the Fury Road fandom and then all met up for the first time at Wasteland Weekend. And, since then, there have been probably about closer to 10, 15 consistent members who come back more often than not. But the, uh, the bolt cutters have been from the founding a very like Fury Road focused, very Vuvolini focused camp, all of originally people who were writing fan fiction for the Fury Road fandom.
Mhm.
But then they got enough critical mass around people with similar mindsets that they actually founded the Green Place neighborhood of the city. And I really love the Green Place because it's, along with being, most of the tribes are AFAB led, or I might use the words tribes and camps interchangeably here. I kind of prefer to use
Yeah.
the word camp for similar reasons to, going back to the Pacific Rim episode, the discourse on gypsy danger versus lady danger.
Mhm.
Uh, like the official terminology is tribes, and I think people tend to use it in a way that's not, referring to indigeneity, but more like going back to the Fallout games. I kind of prefer to use camps more often as the term,
Mhm.
but people use them sort of interchangeably. But yeah, so you've got a bunch of these camps that are all, you know, very queer, like, it's one of the most trans heavy corners of the Wasteland City and especially the theme zone.
Mhm.
Like, uh, and then, yeah, very heavy focus on textiles and fiber art. I should get a photo of this at some point and share it along, but I've got a, old demilitarized Enfield rifle because this is an event that does allow, within certain limits, real steel props.
Mhm.
And so I've got yeah, it's over 100 years old. And I actually have entirely on the sling for this rifle, uh, green place woven fabrics that I've turned into a 3-point sling. And
That's so cool.
yeah, and so yeah, it's a very collaborative, very, it's kind of, I like to joke that the green place is the quiet corner of the theme zone because most of the rest of the theme zone, people are driving through in these big Mad Max vehicles. People are, getting loud and rowdy and partying. And then you
Mhm.
come out to the green place and we're, backs to the desert. There are a couple of little party spots. We actually, this year at Wasteland, had a collaborative speakeasy gay bar called the Peach Pit, which was
Nice.
founded by the Rag Weavers and the Scam Bandits.
Mhm.
Both the Rag Weavers and the Scam Bandits. The Rag Weavers, as their name may imply, are a group of folks approximately our age, which Wasteland ranges, everything from like it's an 18 plus event, but I'd say like the average attendee is like probably lower to mid 30s on up.
Mhm.
There are folks in my camp ranging. I'm actually the youngest person in the clan of the Bolt Cutters, but ranges all the way from, I'm 31. Our oldest member in the Bolt Cutters is probably about 65, 66.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, like Rag Weavers, Scam Bandits are all kind of like upper 20s to early 30s. So, like, reasonably, reasonably youthful by Wasteland standards. But the Rag Weavers are very focused on recycled fibers and making cool recycled fiber and recycled textile clothing pieces. So very heavy on patchwork and very heavy on weaving things together. They actually have their own script where every letter is made up of 3 different stitches at most, called Weavish, as well as the
That's
Rag Weavers
cool.
also have a whole kind of lore system around the, the little fabric care markings on garment tags.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for example, the hand wash only symbol can mean delicate or high maintenance,
Mhm.
or wash hot means rugged, things like
Mhm.
that. If any rag weavers are listening, I realize that's a very approximate interpretation of those symbols, but
Mhm.
running off of memory here, and it's been 3 months since Wasteland, so yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, so and then the Scam Bandits are actually one of the rare theme zone groups coming in from the East Coast, and they have a geodesic dome called the Scammer Dome, wherein they play a lot of social board games and generally hang out, and also have a they have a well, I guess first the Green Place has a tree stump that was actually found at the event site called the Tree Thing, based off of the
Ooh.
Tree Thing from Fury Road.
Mhm.
And so the Scam Bandits have a fake miniature log that they also call the Tree Thing. And they're like, oh yes, this is the Green Place's famous Tree Thing for sure, definitely. Leave cool shiny things at the Tree Thing as tribute that we can definitely not run off and steal. And then also collaborating with them on the Peach Pit were the Autumn Pact, who are one of my favorite groups at Wasteland. They're very have you ever played or looked at much of kind of the like Eastern European science fiction and post-apocalyptic aesthetic stuff like Stalker or Metro 2033 or some of the games in that vein?
I'm vaguely familiar with them.
Yeah. Yeah, so they're very heavily based off of that kind of post-Soviet science fiction aesthetic. So a lot of like very beaten up rags, very kind of militaristic, but militaristic in a like collaborative and wholesome way.
Mhm.
And it's funny, the Autumn Pact started hanging out with, and I think even, you know, dated a couple of the rag weavers, and all of a sudden the rag weavers went from very pacifist all of a sudden, having all these cool custom guns. And one of the funny things about that is you get stuff like, about to share this image in the channel. So we started doing this thing a few years back called the Green Place Trade Convoy. And that's actually me in the forefront riding the Bolt Cutters Taipan two-stroke dirt bike, but you can see a couple of the other Green Place vehicles like BB, the Bolt Cutters bulk carrier, as well as the Autumn Pact's um, trademark blue cargo van.
Mhm.
And so you get like these cool vehicles that are recognizably post-apocalyptic Mad Maxy, but then they're also a little more decked out in textiles and a little bit greener, where some people are all like fully rusted out or matte black. And then yeah, I think the Green Place is a little bit aesthetically picky in some ways. Like the people who run it are very particular about, oh hey, if you're gonna come into this walk, we want to make sure that you're actually living up to the kind of Vuvolini spirit. But then
Mhm.
you also, it does mean that we have kind of aesthetically coherent vehicles like this, the bike we call Lola, which is my own personal convoy runner that was built by, I want to say Central Coast Land Cruisers on Instagram, but Seth, who is just this really sweet fellow, built this bike originally for his wife, and then his wife stopped coming out to Wasteland. So he was like, hey, y'all want a Vuvolini bike? I'm like, hell yeah, I do. But then I'm the only
Mhm.
person on the bolt cutter that's tall enough and good enough at riding motorcycles to actually handle it. So it's kind of become my trademark convoy runner.
Mhm. It's a beautiful bike.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's funny. It is a little bit mechanically finicky because there's a little go kart engines are not quite tuned for hauling that much weight and for sitting for long periods of time. So the belt on that bike actually broke this year, and I need to talk to the guy storing it about getting it kind of refreshed. But then, yeah, so the Green Place Trade Convoy is actually one of my favorite events because it leads to stuff like we tend to pass around seedlings. So this is a shot of us handing fresh fruit from the because part of the bolt cutters lore as well is that we inherited the Citadel from Furiosa, and we're kind of the post Fury Road alliance of reformed war boys and various other like the surviving Vuvolini, the various road warriors like myself, and all collaborating on the old Citadel to make a nice little luxury wasteland commune of sorts. So we've got things
Mhm.
like seedlings and fresh fruit. So that's the hand of the warlord Bridger Farlander, who I'll be talking about plenty down the line here. But having a fresh tomato and some seedlings in exchange for some high quality premium guzzling.
Guzzling?
The petrol, the
Uh,
refined. But yeah. So basically, the because the Farlanders they have a old gas depot in their lore in the mountains of Tennessee and the Farlands along the Great 40, the strip of asphalt of the old world that runs all the way from the old Carolinas all the way to Wasteland itself.
mhm.
And so they they have the resources to do the convoy run. But yeah, the Farlanders are fun because I'm just going to gush about the Farlanders for a second because they rule.
Mhm.
They're these like sweetest people, have these gorgeous Tennessee accents, and then also they essentially in public do not leave character the entire weekend. And so, out of anybody at Wasteland, they're the people I have the most organic LARP interactions out of anybody, to the point where getting into some Green Place shenanigans, we had a basically a LARP ambush that happened at one of the Green Place affiliated camps. The Buzzards of Rukarna staged a bounty hunting because there's a whole bounty hunting mini game where people put up posters, and if you can claim the bounty, you get a prize from the people who are getting bounty hunted. And the Autumn Pact, the aforementioned post-Soviet scavengers, uh, are infamous for being almost impossible to take down in the bounty hunting game.
Mhm.
And so the Buzzards Drukarna staged this whole huge ceremony where one of the scam bandits was going to be inducted formally under the benediction of the Lady of Asphalt, and all these you know elaborate prayers to divine combustion and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And then right at the climax of the ceremony, as it seemed like Winks was about to get this full blessing in gasoline with this like almost Ash Wednesday style smudge of black grease paint across her forehead, Winks whips out the bounty poster for the Autumn Pact. And all of a sudden, everybody's guns up trying to figure out what side of the line they're on. I actually grab one of the other bolt cutters' guns, end up on the side of the line with the Autumn Pact. And then my good friends, the Farlanders, are on the other side of the line. And it's one of the it's one of those where people kind of do the math of like, all right, you've got a gun, you take down one person falls over, next person goes down the line, until it's basically just me, the last couple of members of the Autumn Pact, and the Farlanders left with guns up. And Bridger and I have this whole thing about like, oh hey, if you become too much of a warlord, if you go too far down the line of the Immortan Joe, I am the assigned Kingslayer of Bridger Farlander, the one who will put a knife in his heart and make sure he does not join the ranks of the Immortan and those who per the Farlander's own religion, are in basically their own gasoline themed version of hell. And so I'm like, all right, yeah, I will give Bridger an honorable death. And he looks at me in the eye and says, "You're not going to be able to pull that trigger. You know that you couldn't do that with a clean conscience, are you?" And I kind of look him in the eye. He taps the barrel of the prop gun I'm holding with his chest. And I'm like, "Nope, you're right. Odd impact, I'd be able to take a bullet for you today, but I cannot fire one for you." And I cast the gun down, walk across the opposite side of the line, and they claim the bounty. And so that's like a good example of, you know, wasteland LARP shenanigans, the kind of thing that just organically starts
Mhm.
happening when you get enough of these nerds together in one spot.
That's
And
so
after
cool.
after the fact, half my camp was like, "Wait, did y'all pre-plan that?" And I'm like, "No, that was entirely improvised. That was entirely off the dome."
That rules. That rules so much. Oh my
And like the
god.
whole storyline with Bridger and the Kingslayer title is another thing that's kind of like that, where it's just organically kind of folded together over 4 different wastelands. And yeah, it's just like, because Wasteland doesn't have any formalized LARP rules besides some kind of LARP safety stuff. Like there's little public safety announcements about like, oh hey, if you get in too deep with a LARP shenanigan, like you could put the little timeout sign, like a little T shape with your hands, and that'll give everybody a second to breathe. Like little things like that they've introduced over time.
Mhm.
But there are no like formal LARP stuff. Wasteland has a sister event called Neotropolis. It's like a science fiction night market. That
Mhm.
one does actually have a event sanctioned quest line and everything.
Mhm.
Wasteland is kind of just, oh hey, we have you know almost 4,000 people here and a big enough theme zone that they just kind of trust people to figure some of that out themselves.
Mhm.
I think Neotropolis is a much newer event, but it seems like they're doing more to actually build that into the event. Wasteland, they're just like, all right, people have been doing this for long enough that they'll just kind of figure it out. And that is kind of a double edged sword, because you do end up with, on one hand, it is easier to get into some of these shenanigans if you're already an established Wastelander, or if you're like rolling with big posses where you need like, I think that thing to take down the Autumn Pack, there were almost 30 people there
Mhm.
from pretty established camps who've known each other for years. But I don't think there were too many, like maybe a couple of newcomers, but by and large, just like, yeah, the LARP is a little bit tricky to break into, because Wasteland is definitely, it's a very big open space. Like you've got these, I mean, the inner parts of the city are a fairly compact grid, but in order to really get enough volume to fill in some of these open spaces, like yeah, you need occasionally larger LARP shenanigans. I've had definitely like, LARP interactions with people that are fully in character, fully serious, but are kind of quieter one-on-one moments.
Mhm.
But by and large, yeah, it's like Wasteland. You really need to, in order to make a sizable stamp on the lore or on the theming of things, a lot of time you need bigger groups of people. Where I think that's one thing that is starting to change more over time, is that people are figuring out how to get newcomers into shenanigans a little bit more quickly. But one thing I haven't done as much at Wasteland, but and I'll absolutely plug this video, is People Make Games have a wonderful kind of little mini documentary on their experience at Wasteland Weekend in 2023.
Mhm.
And those guys came all the way from the UK knowing essentially nothing about the event, and kind of started following the quest lines that some of the theme zone camps run. Because in order to get into the theme zone, one of the big things you're supposed to have is, not just showing up and looking cool, but actually bringing something for the community. And so a lot of these camps will either have activities or events. Like, some of them will do burlesque dances. Bolt cutters do a lot of workshops and art stuff. So,
Mhm.
for example, one of the most popular that we do is a figure drawing session where people will show up into our, like, we've got this gorgeous, almost like kind of, like, how do I describe this tent? It's a, like, very, like, open and inviting. And it's got a lot of, like, carpets and cushions, like, almost a little bit like, funny enough, it's not a hookah lounge, but you could almost imagine there being a hookah set up in the corner. I don't think
Mhm.
anybody's ever actually brought one, but it's got kind of that, like, yeah, like cushions and pillows and like a little desert lounge sort of atmosphere. And so you get a lot of folks coming in and just like sprawling out with a pen and pad during this figure drawing session.
Mhm.
And to the point that one's popular enough, we're considering expanding the shade tent to be able to just fit more people because that many people show up for the figure drawing every year.
That makes me so happy to hear. I love to hear that, and it's like people will pose in costume for the figure drawing?
Yeah, I'll see if I can find it. Let me dip into the bolt cutters Discord and see if anybody's got good examples of the figure drawings. But yeah, we'll get everybody from, some folks have never done a professional drawing once in their life, all the way up to our one of our members, Yume, who actually is kind of the de facto host of the figure drawing, is a professional artist, and so you get some incredible stuff out of her. Or also, we've gotten in at least one professional artist who works in the animation industry. Like, actually, the person I found out about Wasteland Weekend from, Kelly Turnbull, the artist of the now defunct but still up and visible webcomic Manly Guys Doing Manly Things, aka the punchline is machismo, uh, has actually shown up to the figure drawing and done figure drawings before. And her art is beautiful. But it is funny to me that, oh, yeah, the person whose webcomic I found out about Wasteland from is now one of my neighbors and was like, that's a camp that I hang out at pretty regularly.
Mhm.
But yeah, hold on. Let me see if I can find one of these figure drawings real quick.
Yeah. Um, I would be curious to hear about the story of how you got into Wasteland Weekend. I feel like that's always, just like I don't wanna just say it's like an interesting story, but, looking back to how I got into Burning Man, which I know is not they're not exactly the same thing, but it's
Yeah,
the
there's definitely an overlap. Like, for example, the
yeah.
like quite a few wastelanders I know are ex burners or sometimes even active burners. But I find a lot of people, especially folks who started going to Burning Man like much more than about 10, 15 years ago and kind of got tired of the tech broification
Uh-huh.
of Burning Man. A lot of those
Yeah.
folks really kind of have shifted the wasteland over time. There is definitely, like, if you go to the big burn or even a lot of West Coast regional burns, there are wastelanders who show up there. Like, for example, Death Guild, who run the Death Guild Thunderdome, uh, do go to both events still. And yeah,
Mhm.
actually, I did know about the Death Guild Thunderdome a pretty long while back because when I was a teenager, I heard about Burning Man. I was like, oh, I could show up there and, like, do a post apocalyptic thing. And then Fury Road came out, and Wasteland itself is actually, I will get a little bit in the origins of Wasteland itself here.
Mhm.
It has been going since either 2008 or 2009, where it was first established as a little get together called Road Warrior Weekend. And Road Warrior Weekend was very much about just a Mad Max themed meetup. And it was a lot of folks, as far as I've ever heard at first, from the Los Angeles kind of goth and industrial scene, which down the line kind of colors a lot of the tone of Wasteland Weekend even to this very day. And then eventually folks started showing up and bringing Fallout themed props and bringing even stuff like Borderlands or original Wasteland characters. And so around this time, I knew about Burning Man, but I hadn't heard about Wasteland yet. And so I'm pretty sure I started hearing about Wasteland just after Fury Road came out because I know, funny enough, at that point in time, late 2015, after Fury Road, I had a post apocalyptic themed radio show that was mostly stoner metal, doom metal, stoner rock, stuff like Fu Manchu, Electric Wizard, Caius, because I'd been a fan of Mad Max and like watched the movies a lot when I was a kid, played the heck out of Fallout, watched even some more obscure movies like Six String Samurai, kind of your cult classics. And so then I heard about Wasteland and I was like, well, I'm a broke college student, but I definitely need to get to that as soon as I can reasonably afford to do so.
Mhm.
And then not too long after, yeah, I saw Kelly Turnbull's comics for Manly Guys Doing Manly Things. Let me see if I can find one of those real quick. But yeah, saw these comics and was just like, oh, I could be having a smoothie with a guy cosplaying the Lord Humongous.
Mhm.
Actually, the Lord Humongous guy, I haven't actually seen him out in a couple of years, but I know for a little while, yeah, he was just kind of this classic Wasteland staple of this guy who runs a pool cleaning company and is a bodybuilder as a hobby, and then would just show up and put on the mask, put on the voice, and just publicly be in character as the Lord Humongous all weekend.
That's
Or
incredible.
there are also Wasteland War Boys who are they used to be a bigger faction and then kind of had a whole implosion at some point or another. Uh, so a lot of them don't come out anymore. But for a little while, there was an entire like one of the first like really I'm in this now is in 2019. I stepped in there with the Farlanders so that I could join the retinue of Bridger Farlander, my aforementioned warlord buddy, to view his meeting with the Immortan Joe, who was basically flanked on all sides by war boys in this huge, those gigantic scaffolding like racks that they use at Costco to store
Mhm.
everything.
Yeah.
Imagine building a fortress out of those
That
and
rules.
then now project the Immortan Joe skull and flames and steering wheel on the back wall, have like war boys standing on all the levels because they know somebody's coming in character. And so like when I say the immersion hits critical mass sometimes, like I'll just step into these spaces and it's not Greg looking through my eyes. It is Tusker looking through my eyes. Like, but yeah, so like, going back to how I found out about Wasteland. So like, yeah, the Fury Road fandom hits critical mass. I start saving up for like 3 more years after 2016.
Mhm.
Show and then I eventually the thing I really look into is that as I'm prepping, as I'm doing my homework, I hear about the plans for the Green Place Ward, which had its first neighborhood in first year as a neighborhood in 2019, and they're running these first couple years of the ward. Unfortunately, we're not doing it anymore, but this thing called the Green Place Initiates, which is basically you can show up as a small camp or a solo traveler so long as you have an in camp setup ready to go. And so I buy this military surplus pup tent. I like paint a whole mural on the side of it. I like cover it in like scraps of fabric and basically, show up and basically go like, Hey guys, I've brought myself a duffel bag and a tent. I heard there was a green place, and by goodness, I'm gonna be the ranger of the green place, self-appointed. Like if you ever get my introduction in writing as a Tusker Rusk, Ward Ranger of the Green Place, uh, in person, I'll just say that if I put it in writing, I will always put parentheses self-appointed after the title because people just kind of. I had showed up again in 2022. I missed Wasteland Weekend in 2021. It did happen, but it was a much smaller and kind of last minute event
Mhm.
with like they were actually pretty good on like vaccination mandatory, show up with a COVID test in hand, all of that stuff. But they
Yeah.
only really confirmed it was happening a couple months before the event, and
Mm.
so I just didn't really. And a lot of folks from the East Coast didn't make it out. Even a lot of folks from the West Coast didn't make it out. But so it was a smaller, quieter event. But then I showed back up in 2022, and the head of the Frucarna, the buzzards that I mentioned earlier, like he kind of dips his head out of their shade tent and goes, "Oh, hey, the ranger's back."
Mhm.
And
Yay.
my first year at Wasteland was kind of funny like that because it's in the desert. This is kind of like Burning Man, like hardcore. Bring your own water, bring your own food. There are food trucks there, and I do bring some cash to get some, like every couple of days a warm food truck meal to refill my caloric surplus. But
Mhm.
by and large, it's pretty rugged camping. Like you're and I didn't have my own shade structure, so much after about 9, 10 a.m., you're getting direct desert sunlight. And I've got this little tiny tent that would just immediately start sizzling inside. And so I really had to bounce around the people's shade structures to be comfortable during the daytime. And so I'd really just go around at first in the green place and then kind of more and more around the city at large, and really just kind of got forced into extrovert mode because it kind of had to be, oh, hey, I'm Tusker. I'm the ranger over in the green place. Y'all want to be my new best friends for half an hour? Which it turns out is a pretty good way to explore around the space because a lot of different places will have kind of a public facing structure that, so long as they're open, which not everybody is all the time, you can just kind of walk in and start talking to folks. And every once in a while, like you'll catch folks at a bad time. Like for example, this year at Wasteland, I planned out the Green Place trade convoy, which we'd done every year, Thursday afternoon. I told people, hey, be ready for this time. And then I ran into a delay getting ready where my motorcycle was kind of malfunctioning and some other stuff came up. And we got started 25, 30 minutes late. And that was enough that half of these camps that we had said, hey, we're coming by around this span of time had forgotten we were showing up and gotten into dinner mode and put their little closed for business signs down. So we kind of had to awkwardly improvise around that and still got some good interaction with people. But it was like, it was a little bit like, oh, whoops, I'm a little embarrassed about it. I mean, the day ended up working itself out just fine. And we, shortly after that had the whole story I told you about earlier with the LARP ambush against the Autumn Pact and everything. So it
Mhm.
was you know, still a fun shenanigans filled Thursday evening, but it was like for a brief moment there was stressful enough that like that night I didn't even really bother partying. My body just went, all right, cool. Sh- Go to sleep early, shake the stress out of your system, wake up, and had an awesome day after that for getting to bed early because I was actually properly well rested and everything. But
Mhm.
sometimes in the desert heat and everything, I mean, you're a burner. I'm sure you've experienced this, but sometimes your body really just goes, all right, no more party. You just gotta sleep it off.
It's time to lay down. Just
Yep.
sleep through the loud music and go lay down.
I also barely slept the night before that anyway. Like it was one of those where the Wednesday night, one of the funniest things that happens is the rec room, which is kind of one of the public facing lounge spaces right inside the city gates. Uh, Wednesday night, they host this thing called the ABBA Power Hour, which is
Mm.
1 hour of absolutely blasting ABBA music. As you know, basically that happens. I get the whole rush of that. Go hit the town with everybody. I don't think I got back in the camp until about 2 or 3 in the morning. Barely slept, and then had the Thursday shenanigans and was like, all right,
Mhm.
we're going to bed early. We're getting a full night of sleep after that one.
Mhm.
But then that Friday was like, one of the better days I've ever had of the Wasteland. So I did this year Friday. The one of the big things was I did a in character ranger talk over at the troop, who are the post apocalyptic Boy Scouts. And so basically, they had me on board for little public service talk about, oh, hey, respect the wasteland. It's not just a place to show up and party, but this is an actual desert environment. And let's talk, from there about how we can build a better and more responsible wasteland, and you know, ideally a more environmentally conscious future.
Mhm.
And all in character with like a took an art easel and a bunch of old magazine clippings and a bunch of figured out how to print stuff out in a way where it looked suitably aged. Tried to pour some leftover bolt cutters uh sun tea on it, but the sun tea wasn't as concentrated as I was hoping, and so it didn't really stain the page so much as just got it wet, but it was still pretty darn funny.
Oh, I haven't had sun tea in a long time. That sounds so good right now. Oh.
And we didn't really have an easel stand, so I just got the scoutmaster of the troop to stand there fully shirtless, and scoutmaster is a rather handsome fellow, to basically just stand there and show off the easel for everybody. And everyone loved it. Like, we actually had a few pretty big name wastelanders show up, and then I need I need my rival slash friend Vance Vanderhorn to send me the Polaroids that he took of it,
Mhm.
because the troop, and in collaboration with Vanderhorn Ventures, actually did a really good job of making sure that whole space looks really tidy and has good natural lighting and everything during the day, while still also being kind of an inviting and fun social space at night. And that's one of the things I really love about Wasteland City, is that people just put a huge amount of effort into actually making these public facing spaces as, like, not just cool and in character and everything, but a lot of the time actually, along with that, open and inviting and fun to actually dip into. And if you look in the troops little uh, public facing side of the camp that they've got set up, they have a little shrine to their deity, the Den Mother.
Mhm.
And so there's really a that's a lovely space. Going back to the map real quick, one of my favorite parts of the city, where so my buddies the Farlanders used to be part of the Green Place, and then I think both in character and out of character, there was this whole well humored, but some tension over, oh hey, this guy's in the Green Place, but he's also a warlord with his whole retinue. And eventually, I think the Farlanders were kind of like, oh hey, what if we do something different? And then the Baron of Undertown, which, if you look at the map, the Undertown is kind of all the way to the right
Mhm.
and directly inside of the main Wasteland Gate, which the Wasteland Gate is this huge, masterfully engineered thing with, it can light itself on fire completely safely. it says Wasteland and like salvaged enormous lettering over top. And so I'll actually share a image of the Wasteland gate real quick as well. But yeah, so the Undertown is kind of this like the domain of the warlords, where you've got all these like big factions who are like simultaneously friends with each other as well as kind of always like threatening to square off. But like, it's one of those things where sometimes in LARP, the people who play the biggest bad guys are actually the sweetest people.
Yeah.
And so the warlord of Undertown, who invited the Farlanders on, like, to come be a rival warlord, is this actually tremendously sweet fellow. After so the Farlanders have this deity called the Silver Man, and Bridger, like one of the things that makes him worthy to be a warlord is that he can channel this, divine teacher who may or may not be a radio signal or AI from beyond. There's some fun, like, mysterious lore about what exactly the Silver Man as an entity is, but treated as a god. And so Bridger puts on this whole, like, if you've ever heard the original Iron Man song by Black Sabbath, like where he does the like, I am Iron Man, like
Yeah.
Bridger puts on that kind of voice for like the entire time he's doing the ceremony, and it has these light up LED rimmed goggles. And if you want moments where I've been in like 5 out of 5 stars in character, like Tusker looking through my eyes at the Silverman ceremony, like Bridger had told me that, like, the whole thing about, hey, if I become too much of a warlord, plunge a knife through my heart and end me. And then the Silverman basically said, one of you has threatened me. Bring me Tusker Rusk. And like and so the previous year in 2023, the whole discussion had been just me, the Farlanders, and kind of the de facto and for a little while de jure uh, Wasteland media guy, Makeshift, who also records a very fun podcast, The Apocalypse Post. Shouts out to Makeshift. And but Makeshift didn't have any of his recording equipment on. He was just having one of his rare, like, completely out from behind the camera, chilling with people. And so it was just like essentially a private audience. And then this time the Silverman brings me in front of everybody, has the crybaby and wise Farlander, like, bring me from out of this crowd of like almost 100 people and like have me, forcibly, air quotes forcibly, I'm playing along with this, and they don't, slam me down too hard, but, like more or less slam me down on my knees in front of the Silver Man. And then the Silver Man kind of goes, you have threatened Bridger Farlander. And like goes on this whole spiel. Is like, to look at a warlord in the eyes, that takes chutzpah. And like, this brief moment where I snap back and like, oh yeah, it is like I have to go back into being myself for a second, because I have to actively stifle a laugh while putting on this mean mug of like, oh, I don't fear the Silver Man. And so the Silver Man does this whole speech about like, you've dared invoke the name of the Immortan Joe, as the bolt cutters are afraid I might become. And then then like as part of this whole thing of like affirming Ias, I give you the title of Kingslayer, and then also gives me this custom forged knife that one of the Farlanders made out of an old ratcheting wrench. And let's see, going back through the phone image folder for a second here. And so yeah, it gives me this knife that is named the Power of Veto. as
That's
well as the title
cool.
of Kingslayer. And then, basically says, Rise, Tusker. And I just kind of have to improvise doing this, like, thumping the knife against my chest and then raising it up into the air. And part of the Silverman ceremony is everybody says something as a chant in the group like 3 times. So everybody's like, Kingslayer, Kingslayer, Kingslayer. As I'm like walking back, and I'm just like, oh, holy shit, that just happened. And one of the funny parts of that is, along with a bunch of big name wastelanders being there, the next night I come out of the Mushroom Cloud Lounge as I'm like starting to wind down my partying for the evening, and this guy who I've never seen before, never talked to, is just like, Kingslayer. And I just kind of have to nod and keep myself from tripping because I've just been like, wait, holy shit, what? In the back of my head. And I just have to like play it as cool as humanly possible.
Mhm.
But yeah, so the Mushroom Cloud Lounge, the is the like personal club of the Baron of Undertown. And I'm in there after the Silverman ceremony. And the Baron tries to test my metal by doing one of the funniest things possible, which is a. Have you ever heard of Baiju?
No.
It is a Chinese liqueur, kind of like shochu or the really strong soju's,
Okay.
like the Japanese or Korean liquor, except
Mhm.
for the distilling process isn't quite as refined. And so you get a lot of these weird funk tastes from the sorghum that they're using.
Mhm.
And it is a lot of people, like 90% of people, just bounce off of it. And I take the shot of Baiju without flinching, pass or put the shot glass in the air, and then pass it back to the Baron of Undertown and go, I have I have conquered the wine of Kalang. And the Baron goes, oh, you might be for real, actually. And then, the next day, like, Saturday morning, Bridger. So Bridger, when he is not at Wasteland, actually has a very long history, not only of LARPing and of role playing games, but also doing a lot of in character as a War of 1812 naval officer. And so he brings to Wasteland his War of 1812 spec uh, medical equipment for doing surgeries and stuff, and basically does an old timey medicine show using a wastelandized version of his War of 1812 medicine show script. And so does like kind of mock surgery demonstrations and everything.
Mhm.
And during all this, the Baron of Undertown is sitting right behind me. And I don't know his exact history, but he has Baiju, a bunch of Chinese snacks. Like, I don't know if he's lived in China or if he just likes a good Asian snack time. But anyway, he's got dried cuttlefish. I'm like, hey, Baron, can you pass me some of that? I love dried cuttlefish. And once again, he kind of looks at me and is like, oh, this guy's legit.
I love that. I love that
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah, it's just like, oh yeah, here's these like big name, intimidating like warlord characters, and one of them's munching on dried cuttlefish, and the other's doing a War of 1812 medicine show, and that's just like kind of some of the, or going back to Kelly Turnbull's Punchline is Machismo comics, like one of them that's like kind of my favorite is the thing that actually happened is the humongous cosplayer making pancakes for people. And so you just get these like larger than life figures just kind of still in character, but also just kind of living life a little bit. And but then you also like I think it's funny that the longer some folks do Wasteland, well, you get a lot of people who show up their first year really trying to wear like heavy gear, like full like Mad Max himself has like the trademark leather jacket with the football pad and everything.
Mhm.
And I've got kind of, you can see it in one of the above photos, my like trademark. Uh, I say light armored vest, but in truth, it weighs about 20 pounds, especially if I've got water in it. It can weigh almost 30.
Mhm.
And basically you get the all kinds of shenanigans like that where it's the hold up linking the pancakes comic. Yeah, it's just like the longer people go to Wasteland, the less they have to rely on that heavy gear. And so this year, I'm just doing all of these big, huge in character interactions. Especially this year was like 103 degrees most days, so wearing the heavy gear is kind of a recipe for heat exhaustion. So I'm just wandering around in my Wasteland basic, like my underlayers, while still having these huge in character moments. And it's just kind of how people end up with, like, you have to do this whole thing for, 4 days or so. And so you just kind of have these moments where people are simultaneously in character and also just having to go about life. Speaking of which, I have linked the Humongous Pancakes comic in the Wasteland channel on the Hyperfixation Discord for
I love it.
yeah. And
Just so
it really is kind of like that too, where it's like, yeah, you'll just or one of my favorites kind of like that is the big gay bar of Wasteland that's been doing what it does for a long time is the actual camp name is the Flight Crew, but their public facing lounge is called the Cockpit. And they'll have a similar thing of hot dog lunch where it's just like, yeah, you show up and they'll give you a hot dog or pass around a jar of pickles. And so you got all these folks who are done up in like, you know, wild wasteland drag and stuff like that. And then also, oh, by the way, hey kid, you want a hot dog? Like nothing even suggestive about it. Just yeah, free lunch for officially the wasteland byline is you can't just like give away food to anyone who walks by. You have to give food and drink to friends. And so there's a little bit of a social element of you actually, if you're going to get food from people, you have to actually stay and hang out for a little while because like they're really trying to make sure, oh yeah, we're following California law here. And so it's like, oh yeah, it's not like there is a barter system for stuff at Wasteland, but the barter, like one of the big things in Wasteland culture that people are really good about is like you can't barter for food and drink. Like food and drink is always one of those where it is a social transaction. Like if you're showing up in the camp and hanging out, like yeah, you have to actually be sociable and interacting with folks and hanging out for the event that they're putting on. So if you show up to Cockpit hot dog lunch, you're gonna stay a while and talk to people.
Mhm.
Which I mean, the flight crew are absolutely lovely folks too. So I
Oh,
think
man.
the first year I showed up, I think Wasteland was a little bit rougher around the edges in some ways. Like there were more kind of like prepper types or like people with occasionally questionable politics. That was one of the reasons over the course of the pandemic that the War Boys kind of imploded as a group, at least as like a formal camp of them, is because some folks had more progressive politics than others, and then some people got caught saying some nasty, like they were acting as the bad guys, and then they actually ended up being questionable people behind the scenes. So the
Mhm.
LARP rule about being the bad guys and being a good person behind the mask is not always true. Sometimes you do get some bad actors in those groups, but those people kind of showed their asses, got banned from the event. So the War Boy presence is still a thing, but they don't have the full blown citadel like they used to. It's smaller and like they still have some fun public facing stuff like a War Boy in themed gym where all the weight equipment is made out of old automotive parts and everything. They've got stuff like that. Actually, ended up one of my rare Wasteland Weekend celebrity sightings because you do get some folks who are actual Hollywood names coming out to this event. Or, for example, Neotropolis, I know Rhett and Link actually recorded some video out there last year. or Wasteland. Like
Oh.
we had the People Make Games guys from YouTube come out. Like,
Mhm.
so I ended up seeing one notable personality who's known for being kind of enormously jacked, actually at the Wasteland Warboy gym one morning, pumping some iron. Very sweet fella, and also pushing more weight than I realized he could at the gym there. But so that was a real funny one. But yeah, so the war boys who are left are totally sweet people, and you get, but it's definitely like, oh yeah, they had to thin the ranks. So quite a few characters got bans during the whole like when they skipped the year during 2020 Wasteland Weekend, realized they could kind of clean house of a bunch of questionable actors or people who got post making or got caught posting questionable stuff on social media and things like that.
Yeah.
And ever since, like, they also in 2019, one of the things that made Wasteland a little rougher around the edges was just that it was the biggest year Wasteland's ever had. Like, I keep on saying about 3,500 people, but that's really been the last 2, 3 years. The like 2018, 2019, it was almost 5,000. And it started pushing the logistics of what the event space can really handle. And especially in one very notable way, one of the things that even in the theme zone kind of breaks up the sightline occasionally out of theme is perhaps the most important thing for being off the grid in terms of what the event actually provides, and not the camps themselves, Brian, the porta-johns. And 4,500 people was just too many. Like, bolt cutters are very good about bringing our own toilet paper and even maybe having a small surplus for other folks, but not every camp was quite as prepared. And
Mhm.
so we're definitely having to do some barter economy on making sure that some of our neighbors could have toilet paper. And then
Mhm.
eventually, some of the more public porto banks towards the city almost pushed overflowing. I shan't get into too graphic detail,
Ugh.
but there is one legendary quote from somebody that year of "It bobbed."
Mm.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, rough times at Wasteland City, and so they actually ever since have shrunk down the event by about 1,000 people in the years since. And fortunately, the event infrastructure has been a little more stable for it.
Mhm.
The other thing that has actually changed since my first year in 2019 and going back to the Wasteland sister event, Neotropolis, is there used to be this thing called the Den that was kind of a super block of camps that all faced each other with their backs against each other. And then in between those camps, there was a big alleyway network that led to a central party zone. And the people who ran the event ended up kind of going on to become some of the creative folks behind this newer science fiction event, Neotropolis, where they were like, all right, instead of doing at the Den or doing the Wasteland Den, we're just going to have a science fiction event, this like cyberpunk night market that is entirely just kind of this little like tight alleyway night markety, like seedy undertown kind of vibe. And so the Den at Wasteland is no more. They tried bringing it back for 1 or 2 years, but the nightlife being even just 1,000 people smaller is like that much quieter to where they just didn't have the critical mass. And so now they've just got this whole spin-off science fiction event that I am hoping to make it to in April. And who knows, maybe I'll be able to give you a debrief on Neotropolis at some point, see how it compares to Wasteland. But the
Mhm.
entirety of Neotropolis is just kind of, or not the entirety, but the core of Neotropolis is, hey, what if we took the Den, and made it an entire event? But the Den had one of my favorite things for a little while in that little back alley. Uh, they called it the Slag Races,
Mhm.
and it was basically, you ever seen Pinewood Derby cars doing the little like race down the slope to get to the end of the line, like just kind of gravity powered?
Yeah.
It was kind of like Pinewood Derby cars, except for with large size vibrators.
No.
and so you know, people would be showing up and cheering on, you know, various camps or various neighborhoods would have their sponsored racer. So we requested a green one and then painted it up with a bunch of vines and leaves and everything,
Mhm.
and dubbed it the Mighty Bush.
Yes, let's fucking go.
And may have actually won one or two of the slag races, like not one of the top performers, but you know, got it where it counts.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, the folks who ran that, again, most of them went on to really kind of focus on the other event. But I know 2023 they actually did a guest party with bringing back the slag races at the Wasted Saints, which the Wasted Saints are kind of fun. They're like a post-apocalyptic like bayou or a little bit of like almost Scooby-Doo and Zombie Island kind of like haunted like witchy Louisiana sort of vibe with that bayou gothic.
Okay.
And so the hog camp folks, the ones who ran the slag races, actually brought back the slag races in 2023 as a one night only kind of deal.
Mhm.
I really like that corner of Wasteland, the fringe. Like going back to the map, it is kind of on the right side and then like at the bottom of like on the map of the city, like on the kind of southwest fringe. Yeah, you've got the fringe is a lot of very kind of witchy camps that are all next to each other. So for a little while, one of the mainstays was the Simota, the atomic witches, who were actually for a little while one of our main stops on the Green Place trade convoy.
Mhm.
And you know, yeah, Simota being atomic backwards were very you know, there are quite a few different camps that kind of sing the praises of the atom. There was actually one of them this year. One of my barter items is one of my best friends works as a naval nuclear officer and actually gave me some radioactive material handling gloves that had, you know, the label on them had hit its expiration date, but they were still new in the packaging. And so I show up to the Temple of the Atomic Light and be like, hey, I've got some priestly vestments for you if you're open to barter. And so I got a articulated coyote spine in exchange for
Yes.
that one of the members of the Atomic Light had found while out on a hike. And then I traded that to my buddies at the what's the museum called? The Fracture Hill Fossil Company. So I donated the coyote spine to the museum. And then
Mhm.
the reward for donating to the museum is that you get a invitation to the Fracture Hill Fossil Company fancy gala. And so I
Ooh.
improvised myself a little bolo tie out of some scrap fabric and a few bits of riveted leather and showed up otherwise in the same clothes I always wear, like my little khaki pants and my button down shirt and a bolo tie to the Fracture Hill Fossil Gala. And so that was one of my funnier barter chains I've ever had.
That's wild. I love that. I'm so blown away by this right now. Like, I wanna go so bad now.
Yeah, it's fun. And it's definitely, I know I've always been in the theme zone and I've always been kind of like involved with the, you know, I've never really done the quests as much. I've always more about like, oh, hey, let's just do shenanigans, like entirely free form and see where that gets us. So speaking of shenanigans and the aforementioned trade convoy, there's me in 2022 as one of the outriders of the trade convoy. And then in the foreground is Beth, another one of the bolt cutters. who finally in the last couple of years has gotten a Wasteland name and isn't just Beth. Because there is a gradient of in characterness from, oh, hey, I'm just myself in costume with my own name, or I am myself, maybe a little bit like larger than life version of myself in costume with a Wasteland name, all the way up to like, people who are fully in character the entire weekend and
Mhm.
maybe break character like in close company. I tend to be more on that side of the line and tend to hang out with people who are on that side of the line. But yeah. And then but yeah, here we are on our trade convoy with the Simota, the priests, the atomic priestesses. And I believe they gave us a feng shui compass as our trade good of choice while on that trade convoy. Now I
Feng
know,
shui compass.
yeah, it's like a lacquered box covered in like ornate carvings with a little. It's like uh, it it's like a classic. Hold up, yeah. Let me see if I can find a good image of one. But it's like it's kind of this classic like Chinese object, which like one second. There we go. But yeah,
Oh,
so
that rules.
yeah, we ended up giving it back to them after the fact because the trade convoy is a little bit more of like a LARP interaction than necessarily a barter interaction.
Mhm.
But yeah, made a whole big show of it, and then they like gave us their benediction before we went cruising away. And so yeah, it's the barter thing can range from being mostly in character formalities, all or like a little quest that people do, like the faceless merchants are kind of notable for this. Like they'll actually give, especially this is a good newbie quest, and if you watch the people make games video at any point, it's a big focus of their video. The faceless merchants will actually give newcomers a trade path to go along, and basically say, "Oh, hey, show up to this camp, barter with them for something, make a little tick mark." And get a signature from somebody, and then once you've completed your barter round, come back to us for a reward. And a lot of the camps in the theme zone, and even a few outside of the theme zone, will have little things like that for you to do. So, for example, my friends the Farlanders, they've got one, which if you're looking at the image of the veto knife, you can actually see the gas chit. And so, with them, it's that they were passing around gas cans to various camps that they were talking to, and then the idea is that somebody would give them, or rather, they would give the gas chit to quest perspectives. The quest perspective would bring the gas chit to the camp, and then exchange gas can for gas chit, and then they would bring the gas can back to the Farlanders, rinse, wash, repeat. So you've just got these various, or there's the bounty hunting quests that newcomers or more unaffiliated people can join in on. And at
Mhm.
Wasteland, I've never really done that style of questing all that much, but it's like I know some people that's all they do during the daytime is they'll just show up to other camps, see what kind of quests they've got, and go run them for people.
That sounds so pleasant. I love activities.
And when I go to the sci-fi event Neotropolis, I think I'm gonna finally actually make myself do some more stuff like that. I'll probably also find plenty of freeform shenanigans. And then the other thing I'm sure will occupy a lot of my time in Neotropolis is the aggressive top fighting league, which is the Beyblade tournament bracket. But
Yes.
but yeah, Wasteland, I'm pretty much all about. Oh hey, I'm just gonna go wandering and see if I can find shenanigans to get into. I have been dubbed the extrovert of the clan of the bolt cutters because a lot of them are very happy to just hang around in camp and really kind of make it a pleasant place for people who show up to come in and like, oh hey, have a little bit of tea, come do some
Mhm.
crafts with us. Oh hey, we have a figure drawing at 4, things like that. Where I'm really the one who wants to go out and be like, oh hey, we're the Vuvolini tribe. Like, we can either bring this to the table for you, or we can, you know, keep you in check if you're getting too ambitious.
Mhm.
Uh, or sometimes I'll, jump into other crews. Like I'll hop on with the Farlanders or the Autumn Pact or Vanderhorn Ventures, like the who are kind of the Wasteland Safari crew, and like the so sometimes I'll hop on with those other groups for various shenanigans. But yeah, it's all kind of good, clean, fun. Well, some of it's less clean than others. For example, stuff like public nudity is allowed, or like, people
Mhm.
definitely are passing around firm amounts of alcohol to trusted friends and things like that. And so
Mhm.
there's definitely it is very much, you know, it's a immersive kind of festival LARP hybrid. Some people are there for the LARP half, some people are there for the festival half. Like there are definitely, I know at least one woman, one of the event photographers, Christine. She makes these beautiful costumes, and it always trips me up the first time I talk to her in a while because you know incredible ornate outfit, like this beautiful reds and blacks, like almost looks like a cardinal bird or something, like, and
Mhm.
then like covered in like ornate feathers, and looks like she could be the villain of a Mad Max movie. And then you talk to her and there's like no character shtick. She doesn't even have a Wasteland name. She's just Christine the photographer. But it's like, she immerses herself so well in the environment that's like, oh yeah, that's right, you're not really part of the LARP shtick, but you bring something to the festival by being both an event photographer and having incredible costume taste.
Mhm. Oh,
Let's see.
man.
I know I've been basically just talking for like almost 90 minutes at this point. You have any big questions or brain
Ugh.
picks you want me to get into?
I'm I'm digesting and also, like, I'm in awe of this whole world that I barely scratched the surface on before walking into this episode.
Yeah. And I
Um,
realize I'm bringing my own biases in some degree because, well, you look at this map and there are dozens, if not like hundreds of camps. Like, but
yeah.
in the theme zone alone, you've got about, 90 or so little labeled areas. And then outside the theme zone, there are another like dozens upon dozens upon dozens of camps.
Mhm.
And so I realize I've mostly been talking about like, the dozen or so groups of people I hang out with.
Yeah,
And even
there's
then, there are a few that I hang out with that aren't as, at least in terms of like fun stories, are a little less easy to talk about. Like, not for lack of stuff to say. It's just like, oh yeah, the big, flashy, cool, like LARP stuff that ends up being kind of my specialty in the event. Like
Mhm.
some camps really go hard on the LARP, and then some camps are really about making a space.
Mhm.
Or there are quite a few where a good example of this is the Dukes of the Nuke, where it's like they camp right across the street from the Mushroom Cloud and the Farlanders, and they're kind of like U.S. Army themed, more or less, like not in a problematic way, more just like kind of running like a classic Cold War kind of look. Or if you've ever played Fallout New Vegas, they almost look a little bit like the Bombers, who are like the Air Force base faction, a
Mhm.
little bit of that kind of vibe going on. And they're one of these groups where it's like if you talk to them in character, they'll talk back in character, but they'll kind of hang out for most of the day, and then they'll have like, you know, a couple times a year they'll go out in the street and form this huge posse, and then go up to like one of their classic rivals in another camp and just have this like big, huge, almost Renaissance fair style, like street interaction, and then that'll resolve itself, and then they'll go back to camp for a little while.
Mhm.
And so some factions, another one that does a lot of stuff like that is Schofield's Drifters, who are another one that kind of have like a, actually they're even more almost like the bombers, like the ex Air Force folks from Fallout New Vegas. But the Schofield's Drifters, like, yeah, if you go into their camp and talk to them in character, they'll talk to you back in character all day. But then, like, yeah, a couple times a year, then they'll do their big, like, everybody out in the street, we're having a big in character, like, interaction with each other.
Mhm.
Well, all right. What's
Ooh. I'm definitely like, as I'm absorbing and learning and visualizing this world in my mind, through you, I'm also remembering a lot of, stuff from my time at Burns. Now, I've never been to the big burn, I've mostly only been to, local regional burns.
makes sense?
Like, Love Burn was the one for my state that I would go to a lot. And, I definitely am feeling, uh, nostalgic about it right now.
No,
It's I miss it a lot. It's been several years since I've gone. Um, but, I could feel it in my brain. I was like, "Well, if what would my character be? Like, what would my aesthetic be? How would I how would I'm already I already feel myself planning my way to Wasteland Weekend."
oh hell yeah. One of the funny things, actually, while we're talking about burners, is that like the burners can kind of go both ways when it terms of what, like, quite a few of the best wastelanders I know are either like, active or ex burners, but then every once in a while you'll end up with some folks who bring the wrong energy from the playa
Mhm.
onto the wasteland. Like, for example, there was one guy this year who brought a burn art car that was well executed, but the problem is it wasn't a wasteland car. It was like a big pirate ship covered in LED lights, and not
Yeah.
even like a water world style ship. Like, there are things this guy could have done to really make it more wasteland, but he kind of had the, like, there's burn affectionate and burn derogatory, and this guy
Yes.
was burn derogatory, where he was like, no man, I'm gonna have my pirate ship and I'm not gonna give a shit about what you have to say about feedback. Like, and he ended up getting thrown out of the event, which is like, people getting thrown out of the wasteland is pretty rare, but like, he just, like, I mean, for one, you're not supposed to bring pets to the event. He brought a dog with him. Like, you're not supposed to. I think what really got him like kicked out, not just sternly talked to, was he actually went out into the desert and like dumped black water from his RV, and that was really the thing where people went from, oh, this guy is kind of a nuisance, to, oh, this guy is a hazard.
Yeah. That
Um, yeah, so it's like, but then, like, for example, like, I know the Vanderhorns, like my who are at this point some of my better friends outside of the Green Place, like, they like, they're former burners, and nobody at Wasteland has a single bad thing to say about them as far as I've ever heard, because they're always just like real shirt off your back types. And like, it's funny, Vance Vanderhorn, who like real name Evan, is very Instagram popular as one of the best like costume and props guys. Like, and like, I say amateur, but I think he's like starting to get hired on the Hollywood productions. And then, like, at one point jokingly this year at Wasteland, I called him like, oh hey, kind of the de facto props master of Neotropolis. And he's just like, oh no man, it's no big deal. I'm like, it's just not even like a coy kind of way, like, just very humble, like, again, shirt off your back kind of guy. And so it's like, yeah, again, there's burn affectionate and burn derogatory at Wasteland
Mhm.
kind of comes up as like, some people, if you say like, oh yeah, there's an overlap between Wasteland Weekend and Burning Man, like, they're like, oh yeah, of course there is. And then some people, like, they hear that statement and they're like, oh no man, we're not like those burners. Those guys are total road rash. Fuck those guys.
Mhm. No, I can see that. I know exactly what you're talking about. And I could see where that occurs.
I remember, some burn derogatory, but I do have a lot of affectionate memories.
Speaking
That's for
of like
sure.
big, larger than life characters, just kind of having a general chill session. Here's the aforementioned warlord of Undertown, as well as a bunch of his cohort, all hanging out in the mushroom cloud to give you kind of an idea of like, what I say, what I mean. Yeah, larger than life characters just kind of vibing along.
Oh, I love the colors, I love the outfits.
Yeah, I think one thing that people have really figured out over the years is like there is kind of a default, like, kind of your post-apocalyptic color palette of your olive drab and your browns and your rust and your blacks. But
Mhm.
then I think one thing that people have really figured out over the years is how to incorporate color without it breaking things up in a bad way, like how to still have these bright colors be immersive. And I'll see if I can find any photos of her in the Wasteland official image gallery, but there's definitely, I know someone brought a kind of have you ever seen any of the videos for My Chemical Romance's Danger Days?
No.
So Danger Days is post-apocalyptic, but it's like bright and colorful, and there's some stuff like that, which is like, so there is an elaborate, organized theme document for Wasteland about like, oh hey, here's how to keep things kind of grounded in a like feasible post-apocalyptic, like they, it is still to this day not a Mad Max event first and foremost, but Mad Max is kind of the baseline, like, oh hey, if you were walking around on the set of like, if they made a new barter town kind of environment, or if you've seen Furiosa, like one of the camps in Furiosa, if you were just walking across the screen in that, would you like visibly stand out as like not immersive, is kind of the vibe of what they're aiming for. And so, like, for example, with Fallout being part of the theme, you can only really do the human parts of Fallout. You can't really do like, because there are plasma guns and laser guns and super mutants and robots and power armor, and you can't
Mhm.
really bring that part of Fallout. And so I'm trying to find, because as it stands, like My Chemical Romance's Danger Days on its own is a little bit too bright and like retro futuristic and poppy. But someone figured out how to do this like really lovely, very like brightly colored Danger Days type outfit. Uh, but then add enough grunge around the edges. Or actually, I found a photo at least of somebody doing a Tank Girl cosplay that does kind of a similar thing, where it's like, because Tank Girl on its own is very like bright and poppy and everything. But then if you just mute the colors a little bit and you just add some tears to the edges and you like get a few like little extra belts and things on there and break up
Yeah.
the outline a little bit. Like I think this picture I just shared is a lovely example
Oh, it
of,
rules. That's
yeah,
so good.
how to do like the big comic booky Tank Girl look at also like a Wasteland compatible volume.
Mhm.
And I think the other thing that's kind of fun with Wasteland is that everybody's bringing a little bit of their own aesthetic for us. So, like for me, very kind of like I, I've cranked up the grunge style over the years, but I try to keep things in like a very realistic envelope, and then like take it a little bit past realistic to make it stand out, because like you've got to be a little bit larger than life with how you wear stuff, because like natural weathering is like, when you're next to somebody who's covered their outfits in 4 layers of grunge, naturalistic weathering ends up looking a little bit too muted and a little bit too like you just are wearing normal clothes, and so you have to make it larger than life.
Yeah.
But then like, so I've still kind of done what I can to make it look like, okay, cool, I've been like tromping through mud, or like, torn my clothes on a thorn bush, or like, oh hey, maybe I found this shirt off of a guy who's been like slashed by something with big claws. but like, keeping it within a realistic envelope. But then you get some people who are doing like pure over the top craziness, and then kind of everything in between. Wasteland does allow like kind of limited certain cosplays. So, for example, like that Tank Girl image, or sharing another one of somebody doing a 6-string samurai cosplay from the old 90s kind of cult classic low budget B movie. But so you get these like certain cosplays, or like certain Mad Max characters are totally allowed. But then, for example, one of the big things in the theme document is like you can't show up doing like certain other, like, basically there is a envelope of allowed cosplay, but if you showed up in like a Luke Skywalker outfit, or once one guy got in trouble for showing up as a like One Punch Man, and
Oh.
it's like also the event organizers have their own biases, so like they're not super fond of anime. They're a little bit weird about furries, stuff like that.
Mhm.
I mean, there's definitely certain things where it's like, oh, hey, like there's a little bit of a limited envelope for still having like furry meetups and stuff like that. But uh, by and large, it's like, oh yeah, no fursuits, or even like, furry tails, or like ears are allowed within a certain envelope, but it's like that's definitely one of the things where it's like, oh yeah, as far as I've ever seen people get in trouble for, like, I think part of it's also there was a point in time in the mid to late 2010s where like a lot of burners were wearing like, not capital F furry, but like furred, like neon blue scarves and stuff like that, or like the hats with the really long ear flaps that went down in the like little paw mittens. And so I
Yeah.
think like, I think that's one of the things where it's like, oh yeah, that kind of stuff was meant to target a certain kind of rave fashion, and then kind of ended up also encompassing, you know, furry stuff within the way the rules is written.
Mhm.
But then you also like, along with like there is some room for like kind of more sci-fi stuff, so long as it's like, I think one of the funny things with Wasteland rules is that you can bend them a little bit more if it's very well executed. And
Mhm.
so, for example, like you know, one vehicle that never actually existed in real life, but uh somebody built a very cool example of, is this little like the flea car from one of the Fallout games.
That's cool.
And so it's like, never actually existed, but it's like because it looks feasible, and because it's like very, very well done, and like doesn't break immersion, it's like that, like that's well done enough that, oh yeah, that vehicle never actually existed. But it's also like kind of rule of cool starts applying.
Yeah.
And um let's see, trying to think of anything else that is particularly fun or funky with the but I mean, yeah, it's like the theming is basically, it is very expansive as far as what people can do outside of just Mad Max space stuff, or what, like, basically, so long as it's like human forward, and especially so long as it's like, I think, yeah, basically so long as it's not breaking immersion is and like the immersion thing is like, you kind of know it when you see it, but it's like all the photos I've shown above are pretty good examples of like the general atmosphere and like kind of the color palettes that people are really commonly working with.
Yeah.
And when it all comes together, it really is an incredible effect, like this larger than life. And then you get funny stuff like, oh yeah, at night people doing stuff like singing ABBA and getting a little crazy with it. That is like, is it perfectly like one to one in theme? Maybe not, but is it like the is it like kind of the right vibe? Absolutely.
Mhm.
And so cool, we got about 20 minutes left to work with here. But yeah, I mean, that's basically what Wasteland is a bunch of folks bringing their own creative spice to a pretty well established event, but it's also one where even in the 4 years where I've been going, people keep on bringing new stuff and keep on finding ways to expand what Wasteland is. And if you go back and look at, especially the pre Fury Road events, which they do have the highlight reel videos and stuff for, and a lot of like pretty good documentation of, thanks to folks like Makeshift. And I know Makeshift actually recorded a podcast episode recently talking to somebody who last attended Wasteland pre Fury Road in 2014 and then came back in 2024 and kind of interviewed them about like, oh, hey, what all has changed? What all is still the same? And they, if you go back and watch the old highlight reels, it is kind of incredible how far people have pushed the envelope on costuming and theming and really like figuring out how to make all these quests, all these LARP events, all these barter items, like really just not only be fun in their environment, but also just be like, some of these people are bringing a world class, like amateur cosplay and prop building to the event.
Mhm.
And you get a lot of like actual Hollywood guys too, who are just kind of showing up and doing some of this stuff, not even for pay, for fun. Like
Yeah.
all these prop riggers and pyrotechnics masters and folks like that, just building things like the flammable wasteland sign or the pyrotechnics around the stage simply because they can.
Mhm. Hey, they've got the skills and they've got the drive, like, let them cook.
Absolutely. And yeah, as far as what wasteland is to me, it really is that going back to my little intro spiel there, it really is that quote from the first history man at the end of Fury Road. Where must we go, we who wander this wasteland in search of our better selves? And when I'm out there as Tusker, as a ranger of the green place, that really is what I'm trying to do. Is not just bring my best self out to the wasteland, not just like a larger than life version of myself who has kind of taken on a character life of his own, but also really help bring out the better self in the person around me or the people around me, and really just make something, not just taking the skills of everybody who I meet, but also like building something bigger than that. And it's kind of what Wasteland Weekend is to me.
That is so cool. I you were so cool.
All shucks.
Um, I'm so and obviously this is something you're probably gonna be doing for as long as you possibly can, and
Yeah, any
uh
year I can reasonably afford it, and occasionally years where I haven't been able to reasonably afford it, but have still managed to, especially coming out from the East Coast, like to put a dollar number on it is like the ticket to this thing isn't cheap. It's like about $350.
Mhm.
And then, you add on air travel. Car rental is actually the single biggest cost, especially in years if I can't get a carpool with somebody. Like, getting a car rental at LAX or Burbank can be like, $600. And so it's like
Mm.
the out of pocket number. Like, I basically just say, all right, cool, reserve about like $1,500 is kind of the which like you split out the airfare, like booking the car rental, some of that stuff over the course of a few months, and it's like not the single biggest hit to the wallet possible, but it's also definitely like, oh yeah, I do have to spend about a quarter of my year budgeting around this. So
Yeah, but it's worth it,
yeah.
and
Also,
that's the
also giving you that number or anybody listening that number in case they are coming from the East Coast like we would be, or
Mhm.
e- even from like the Pacific Northwest, it's a pretty long drive. Obviously, not paying for the stuff like car rental quite as much, but not a not a small amount of time off from work or things like that either coming from that direction. So
Yeah. Do you I know. So besides, airfare, travel, um, it's definitely not cheap to prep for that level of camping, especially it's more than just a weekend. It's like a whole week, right?
It runs from Wednesday to Sunday, even though, and there are years where I've gotten in a little bit early to help my camp set up as well. But since I'm camping with an established group, it's definitely cheaper in that I just help kick in on. We had to replace our big barracks tent, which is like one of those big pyramid tents that it's technically an 8-person tent. Usually, most years only has 2 or 3 people in it, but we replaced it since the old one was starting to get so UV damaged that it was like disintegrating a little bit with a
Mhm.
nice canvas tent that somebody had left over from an events company or like a outdoor outfitter or something. And
Yeah.
so we replaced it. And so I kicked in a little bit for that. Or like my camp has just annual dues of about $50 or so for covering things like our storage cost or my own motorcycle. My wasteland motorcycle lives on a like this one of the members of the Black Thumb camp, the people who do the on-site mechanic work and have this huge fleet of very cool handcrafted custom vehicles. Uh, so my wasteland motorcycle ends up living on his compound for most of the year, and so I pay him a few bucks a month for storage on that, as well as then my camp also has a trailer full of like the stuff that's less temperature sensitive that we can keep outdoors. All kind of lives at his compound as well, and so camp also pays a few bucks a month. So the yearly dues and the when we have like 10, 15 people kicking in dues ends up covering things like that or helping with some of the transport costs for our kind of de facto camp leader in air quotes. Donda lives all the way out in Colorado, and so that camp dues also ends up helping with a little bit of the transport, bringing the main camp trailer with some of the more temperature sensitive goods in it that don't live outside in the desert in California,
Mhm.
come all the way from Colorado. So stuff like that. We've also done like fundraisers for a zine in the past,
Mhm.
which I'll link that in the Wasteland channel as well. It's called the Bolt Cutters Booze Book. And the Bolt Cutters
Nice.
Booze Book actually, what it mostly does is that we have one camp member who comes all the way in from the Netherlands. And so that ends up paying for Arwen's whole, or helping to pay for Arwen's airfare, things like that. Because Arwen also ends up, along with doing in camp stuff, runs the or helps to run the archery range for the event as a volunteer as well.
Mhm.
And so getting her out every year, she's reasonably able, which is a big time investment and financial outlay, obviously. But
Yeah.
stuff like the booze book ends up being able to help her get out there, not only to help our camp out, but then also to do the archery range.
Yeah. Oh, that is so cool. I definitely I'm definitely gonna have to go at least once in my lifetime.
Hell yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, I envy newbies to Wasteland because, I mean, don't get me wrong, I still have a blast every year that I go, even after 4 years. But I think there is just something incredible to seeing the whole thing with fresh eyes and really being able to kind of play along with it as you go.
Mhm.
I think
Absolutely.
there are several very good little like Wasteland mini documentaries on YouTube, but I think the one that I'll end up linking in the Discord channel and that I actually appear in, as well as the bolt cutters appear in several times, is the People Make Games mini doc that I mentioned earlier,
Mhm.
which those guys were awesome to kind of informally work with. I kind of ended up accidentally becoming their fixer at a couple points for like here and there. But yeah, these British YouTube guys like kind of show up in our camp, and I recognized them pretty quickly because I had seen their videos before, but nobody else in the camp knew who they were. And they were just trying to come along and run the little faceless merchants trade mission, and I was trying not to vibrate out of my chair, being just like, oh, I know who these guys are. And but yeah, shout out Chris and Quinns, aka Muckraker and Carry On. If you guys are listening to this by any chance, yeah, y'all rule. But yeah, their video kind of has some of the best out or overlook of what kind of the first year Wastelander experience is actually like. I think
Mhm.
there's also a couple of older ones that I think are pretty darn good. And I might link a few of those in the Discord for you to watch later as well. But yeah, I think yeah, probably the best ones are that, and then there's an older one from like 2016 or 2017 called "What Is Wasteland Weekend." That so Wasteland is actually on its own event site now, but they used to be at this place called H Park that was kind of like a during parts of the year like a dirt bike and RV campground that they just kind of would rent out the entire thing for Wasteland for a long time.
Yeah.
And H Park, I never got to go to it, but I kind of envy the people who did because I like the grid layout of Wasteland for being easy to navigate. But I think that H Park had a more non-linear. The layout almost reminds me of like the Maryland Renaissance Festival or something.
Mhm.
And so, like having a wasteland with that kind of like less linear sight lines and like a little bit more circular, almost like I know the Big Burn has kind of a similar radial layout, but I think like having that kind of like curved sight line and like a little bit more broken up. Like it sounds like it was a pain to navigate around, but looking at the map of the old event site is really cool. But the What Is Wasteland Weekend, the other one I'll link is at the old event site, but I think it has kind of a good overlook of like what the sense of humor of Wasteland is in a little bit more of an in character kind of way. But yeah, that People Make Games video, like it's got a gajillion views at this point, but I think it deserves every single one of them because for what the first year experience is like and what is organically discover the event, I think is unparalleled.
I'm I'm so excited. I'm gonna watch this video for sure. I need to see it with my own eyes. I am I'm like Mm. I've at the end of all my episodes, I get this, like, nice little I'm gonna say drunk feeling, like, I feel like I'm just full of good brain chemicals, like, I've learned about this really cool thing, and, I'm just blown away right now. I'm definitely going to dig into this a little bit more and destroy my YouTube algorithm with Wasteland Weekend, um, and maybe start, saving up to go 1 year,
And
'cause
honestly, I think one of the fun things about like doing your Wasteland homework and like figuring out like you start looking at especially like thrift shop racks or like military surplus kit and just like ideas kind of start clicking together. And so for me, like Tusker's whole vibe, funny enough, was I in 2018, going back to like the how did you get to Wasteland, I was teaching chemistry in East Africa at the time, and a few years before that, I had done some like wildlife and limited anti-poaching work in South Africa. And so I was like, all right, how do I make like a wasteland ranger in a way that echoes my lived experience and some of the like shenanigans and like time living in East Africa and working in Southern Africa, but without being appropriative or colonization minded about it. And
yeah.
so like, you know, along with just like scouring every single surplus bin and everything, I actually ended up drawing Tusker as like, oh hey, what's my like platonic ideal of a wasteland ranger based off of my own experience. So I drew the character and then built it from there with like a compatible vest and hydration pack and a bunch of like part of the decolonization metaphor is actually stealing little bits of surplus kit from a bunch of different countries that have infamously been colonizers and be like, oh yeah, uh, you know, got all of these off of dead colonizers, things like that.
Nice.
Which is because yeah, one of my friends in the Ragweavers, shout out to Soot, but Soot asked me in 2023, like, oh hey, what's the whole deal with Tusker? Like, where's your mind out on that? I'm like, hey, I have lived experience working in like countries that have been directly affected by colonization, up to including this one. Let's do like a whole walking meditation on decolonization in a way that also looks badass.
True.
And so, like, I think a lot of people bring like, similar lived experience in terms of like, hobbies or fixations or what have you into the wasteland with them and build something bigger and cooler out of that. Like,
Oh,
I know a lot of wasteland factions have either like, spiritualities or like religious undertones. One of my favorites that shows up actually pretty well in the People Make Games video towards the end are the restorationists, who like some of the sweetest people, incredibly like progressive minded, and have a whole lot of stuff to say on a whole lot of things. Yeah, shout out to Overkill and Preacher and all of them. But so they've got this tongue-in-cheek religion based out off of a bunch of cow-headed deities named things like Zir, Chlor, and Dacian. Note that those all have a ox that you can add to them, and so all these cow-headed gods that they've got like a tongue-in-cheek pantheon of, and the and so not only is their space like actually kind of a immersive, like almost religious feeling space, even if it's in a tongue-in-cheek way, but then like so one of the scriptures of them that going back to the bolt cutters being a bunch of former and current fanfic writers and fan artists, we have a history of doing collaborative fan fiction about the like basically smut fics about the deities. And so this year, it actually got to the point after doing this for many years that the halftime show for the election of the Pope via a little reality show series of mini games, the halftime show for the papal election was reading the dirtiest smut fic that the bolt cutters have ever written,
yo.
with things like mpreg and various stuff like that
Yo.
involved. And yeah, just I think we got a video of it somewhere. It is absolutely filthy, but yeah. So it's like, because basically the restorationists are about making things clean and about making things dirty, and so that like if you walk into them and you're not sufficiently covered in like grease and grime, like especially if you're a first year, like aforementioned internet micro celebrity I saw at the Mad Max theme gym had a pretty clean outfit to start with and actually went to the restorationists and got all filthed up. So shouts out to Vic Ethanol, you know who you are. But yeah, the but yeah, so the restorationists and the bolt cutters having this like little symbiosis of like their own skills and senses of humor and fixations. Like again, it's that like sensation of the wasteland, like not only bringing out the best in people, but kind of becoming more than everybody's best. Is like I think really kind of the magic of the event that brings title drop time, the hyperfixation.
There we go. Okay. Yep. Okay.
Also,
Ah,
I realized halfway through the recording that I was too busy talking that I forgot to actually point Audacity at Emma's plug and play audio. So Thank goodness for our friend Craig, because I'm realizing it towards the end of the recording that oh shoot, my local audio is flatline
Oh
because I
no,
forgot
yep.
to point out the new mic. So fuck you, Craig.
Fuck you,
Hey
Craig.
Craig. Hey Craig. Looking like fresh road rash over there, buddy. Actually, speaking of cursing out Craig, well, I've still got a couple minutes to play around with. One of the classic things at Wasteland that is like kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing. And speaking of what used to be a rougher edge my first year, that people actually do less nowadays, is like "fuck you" as a greeting. And it's like meant to be well intentioned and humorous, but I know a lot of people who just kind of got fed up with the joke over time, and so like nowadays, if people give me a "fuck you" as a greeting, I'll answer back in kind once in a while, or do a
Mhm.
similar tongue in cheek response. But like, I'm a little less likely to say, "Oh, fuck you," out like off the hip. But for Craig, hey Craig, fuck you. My
Oh,
voice ends up sounding very shot by not even by the end of Wasteland, more like a day into it, because you can hear my voice getting crunchier over time after 2 hours of phone call. Now imagine keeping up the grit and gravel for another 100 hours, and there you go.
mhm. Oh, I've been, passively fantasizing and building I love, role playing. I've done a lot of, like, actual play podcasting and D&D or, Fate system type games, and I've been very, like, passively, as, like, a fidget spinner almost for my brain of, like, okay, so, maybe my character would be, like, a bartender type or, like, some sort of, like, tea shop owner, and what kind of voice would I use? Would I use this voice or use that voice? Like, I'm already, putting names together there. I'm so excited about this.
People do love a good bar or tea shop, I will say, out of the waste.
Because you were talking about, a lot of it's like a larger than life version of yourself, and it's like, I don't know, are you familiar with Kava and Kratom by chance?
I'm loosely familiar. I have no practical experience with them, but
Mhm.
I am aware of the phenomenon around them.
I used to work at a ethnobotanical tea bar.
Ooh,
Um, it was a lot of fun. It was a hookah bar and a tea bar. So it was a sober environment, no alcohol. But even if it was alcohol, if it was just tea or whatever, coffee. I've worked in my share of cafes. Like, there's a part of me that's just like, I would love to just have like some sort of bar types camp set up and just be in like a fucked up looking like barkeep kind of outfit, and maybe it's like a attached to some mechanic shop, and I just I just got it, like, it's already starting to cook in my mind, and it's probably gonna, whatever end result's probably gonna be the thumbnail. um oh, I'm cooking. We'll talk more about the thumbnail when the episode is over. I'll message you about it, but I'm so excited.
hell yeah, yeah! I'll send along a few links and stuff. I've actually got to go move my car pretty soon here ahead of this friendsgiving that Emma and I have in a few minutes. So we're
Yeah,
approaching my cutoff time, but
yeah.
hell yeah,
So
welcome to the
we can get
wasteland.
welcome to the wasteland. Let's fucking go. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing about your experiences and about Wasteland Weekend with me and of course all of our listeners. Like, that's huge. I feel so good right now. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, this has been a blast. And yeah, if you've got any questions, or people can find me on Discord as Hammer Mellis. And then also I'm on the Hyperfixation Discord, as well as the official Wasteland World Community Discord. And so yeah, if folks have any questions, I have been Tusker Rusk at your service, the Ward Ranger of the Green Place and the named Kingslayer of Bridger Farlander.
Hell fucking yeah, let's go. Absolutely. Come into the Discord if you've got questions. We've got link to the Discord in the episode show notes, or you reach out to me and I'll get you in there. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, and we'll all talk about it in the Wasteland Weekend thread. Um, and I know you got to go, so we can get this tied up. Stay tuned after the outro. There's an announcement that y'all hear. Um, so thank you for be safe, don't die, drink your water, and badoo.
That's right. Y'all heard them. Drink your fucking water and stay alive out there. It's a harsh wasteland. But if you know what you're doing, you can make it too.
I love that voice. I need you to be my GPS really bad.
Now turning onto Rosewood Boulevard. Make right hand turn into Wasteland Weekend event site in 6 miles.
Hell yeah. Yeah.
Oh man, I didn't even get to talking about how you have to do some limited off-roading to get into the Wasteland site.
Yo, really?
Yeah, just a little bit.
Just a little bit.